Hello and welcome, everyone. Thank you for joining us for the summer 2023 FCI Live Series. We are well into the second week. We have a couple sessions today and tomorrow before we wrap up, and they are some great ones. This is a highly requested topic. We've had some, it's really been fun getting your requests and following up on those. One of them was, we want to talk about point of sale system. We want to know more about point of sale systems. What is with this point of sale system thing? All right, so we've got your answers. We have brought in Aaron Chase from ECRS, who's going to talk with us today, who is an expert in such things and works with cooperatives, works with startups, and with other kinds of small businesses in setting up point of sale systems. So we're going to get into that in just a minute. Real quick, just a point of housekeeping, please mute. It really helps the sound quality because we're recording. So please do check right now that you are on mute, and please stay on mute unless very specifically one of the speakers requests you to come off mute. If you want to ask questions, please put them in the chat, or you can use the raise hand function and I'll keep an eye on that as well. This session will be very conversational today, so we do encourage you, raise the hand, put it in the chat, but please don't come off mute unless we request, because this session is being recorded, and yes, all the videos for all of the sessions from this summer FCI Live will be available Monday, July 3rd. I will send out an email to you the afternoon of Monday, July 3rd with the link to where all of the sessions from this round of FCI Live from our summer 2023 series will be on the FCI YouTube page, on the Food Co-op Initiative YouTube page. So I'll be sending that out to you Monday, and you will have access to all the recordings to rewatch, to share with your board members. We encourage it. Thanks for asking. And real quick, just want to thank our FCI Live champion sponsor, National Co-op Grocers, who have made this series possible this time around. We deeply appreciate it. Okay, and with that, we're going to dive into our topic of the day, which everyone, like I said, has been asking for. From Green Top Grocery. Oh, hi, great to see you guys. Okay, so some people from established co-ops. We're gonna be talking today about your future point of sale system with Aaron Chase, and we're really grateful to have him here today. You guys do ask this question a lot, understandably, about what is the point of sale system? When do we need one? All sorts of questions. So we're going to lean on Aaron's expertise and learn a whole lot about it today. Thanks so much for being with us, Aaron. You want to share with us a little bit about who you are and what organization you're with?
Yeah, absolutely. My name is Aaron Chase. I am a sales rep for ECRS. Our product is Catapult. I've been with the company for about 9 years and have been fortunate to work with co-ops really right from the start. My first two deals that came to fruition were Littleton and Hunger Mountain, both in the New England area. And that just kind of set the tone for me. And I've really enjoyed working with co-ops ever since. And linked up with FCI some years back, which opened up the possibility of starting to work with some startups, but also just kind of speak to co-ops in a more neutral capacity. You know, I put my salesman's hat on every now and then. It's kind of unavoidable, but I enjoy this kind of opportunity to just share some of the pitfalls and you know, other things that I run into in the process.
Excellent. Well, thank you for being here. And you've worked specifically with a couple startup food co-ops, is that right?
Yeah, most recently with Assabet in Dorchester.
Excellent. I wanted to point that out to those who are in attendance because you guys, as you might have noticed, there's people who've worked with food co-ops and there's people who've worked with startup food co-ops. And sometimes our needs and experiences are a little different, a little more intense. So Aaron knows about those, which is part of why we were really excited to have the opportunity to have him here today. And I hope you caught Aaron represents ECRS is Catapult. It's one of the two most used systems by food co-ops. I think at this point it is the most used system by food co-ops. There's also one called SMS that is used by a decent number, but at this point, Catapult is most common amongst your peers at food co-ops of all sizes. So, all right, well, let's get right into it. I want your expertise, not to listen to me. So let's get into the heart of it. Why is the point of sale system decision such a giant decision, such an important one?
Yeah, so I think point of sale is really a decision about how the co-op is going to run. I think there are two sort of lenses that retailers tend to view this through. There's the school of thought that's to go lightweight, kind of treat your point of sale as a cash register. It's a minimal expense at that point, preserves capital for other initiatives. The second is to view the solution or stack, which we can talk more about later, as the technological backbone of a business. There's much more of a focus on data and how various systems come together. The generalizations, but I do think that thinking of it that way serves to illustrate that it's not a one-size-fits-all question. It's more of a nuanced decision. Also, by the time you've signed the contract with a POS vendor, you've got most everything worked out, or at least mostly in terms of your business plan, your marketing plan, what tender types you're going to accept, what your sort of ideal staffing plan is going to be. Kind of a lot of the, not just the skeleton, but a lot of the meat to how your business is going to run as well. And point of sale is really an integral part of that. It's going to go a long way towards defining the tools that you have available to you. If you buy too much system, the price tag is going to be high, and you're going to find that the ongoing fees are brutal for your business. You're sinking money into your monthly support contract as opposed to investing it where you can make money. And if you buy too little system, you have kind of the reverse problem. All the money that you're sinking into initiatives are really going to be hamstrung by the fact that you don't have the tools you need for the job.
I want to point out, and you're gonna catch me doing this. I'm sorry, Aaron. I want to echo something Aaron said and highlight it again, which is, I think that's so important what you brought up, that a lot of people are like, well, our POS, that's our cash register, right? And as someone who's run a food co-op of two different sizes, it is not. That is one of its functions. The point of sale system, the cash register function is, so people sometimes ask us, understandably early on, well, can we just use Square? Can we just use Apple, like a little screen, and understand that at your food co-op, it's doing a whole heck of a lot more. So, from data and from inputting all of your product to setting your prices, to doing price changes, to doing ordering, you're using that information. I mean, you're doing so many things, to sending out coupons, to understanding how your customers shop with you. It is, like you said, it is the technological backbone of the store. So that let's pick that apart a little bit. You talked about it's a business operations decision. It's core to operations. Can you elaborate a little more on what all it affects and does within the store and its operations?
Yeah, absolutely. I do just want to jump back real quick. You brought up Square, which raises another really important consideration, thinking about the financial side of this, and really why it can be such a huge deal. Every point of sale vendor has their own revenue model, of course. When you look at some of the lighter weight solutions you can deploy more cheaply, sometimes, not always, but sometimes those solutions are looking to make their money on locking you into processing contracts. So when you're considering point of sale, it's important not just to consider the upfront cost of the solution and also the ongoing support and maintenance costs, but also the other costs that solution is going to impact.
And specifically, when you say processing solution, because some people aren't experienced with that, that's kind of a hidden cost. Can you say what exactly where the processing costs come in?
Yeah, absolutely. So, anytime you take a payment via credit or debit card, there are fees that get tacked onto that. And some of the lighter weight solutions are going to lock you into, that's exactly, credit card processing. Some of the lighter weight solutions are going to lock you into contracts where those fees can be, 3%. And on the other side, you might have, depending on who your wholesaler is, the opportunity to sign on to kind of a conglomerate arrangement where you're locked into a specific processor, but the rates have been negotiated as if there's 600 stores as opposed to just you.
Yeah, and I know we don't want to get off track with that, but I just want to point out to those who don't know, when he says 3% on credit cards, if you've never run a business that takes credit cards, so that credit card processing fee will be tens of thousands of dollars even your small co-op will spend a year. So the difference between 3% and maybe being able to get a 1.7 because you go onto a credit card processing contract with NCG or something is huge. So he's talking about the hidden costs that can show up in making this POS decision by going with these cheap, what seems like a cheaper option. But I'm going to take us back then. I think that was an amazing point. To what all does this point of sale system do for you operationally? How does it affect operations?
Yeah, so kind of regardless of how you're looking at point of sale, whether you're considering just a lightweight, sort of more strict point of sale or a more modern, more capable solution, you're still left with some questions. You still have to answer how you're going to handle purchasing and receiving. You have to answer whether you're going to maintain an accurate inventory, and if you plan to, how. Is that going to be a day-to-day process? Is it going to be a quarterly or annual inventory? You have to answer how you're going to maintain margin, how you're going to catch changing costs from your supplier and make sure that you get your prices updated on the shelf and in the system on time. You're going to have to sort out what your product mix is and what your supply chain looks like. If you have a marketing or email outreach strategy, what information are you going to use to make critical business decisions, and how are you going to get at it? Transactional data is critical for that. And then also what touch points you're planning on offering customers. Will you be deploying self-checkout? Is e-commerce an integral part of your business? What about selling off-site or doing parking lot sales? Will you need a mobile solution? Are you planning on doing made-to-order, offering sandwiches and other things that people can just sort of order as they want? I think when you view, this is a personal bias of mine, I think when you take the stance of point of sale as this kind of lightweight solution, you're kind of robbing yourself of the advantages that data can provide. And this is where we get back to this idea of stack, sort of thinking about point of sale at the very least as part of your overall technology solution, and how that data is going to move around. We can look at one kind of primary example, just thinking about item movement, just basic transactional data. A simple movement report, which really you should be able to get out of any solution, will tell you what your fast and slow movers are, but that's not really the whole picture. To start with fast movers, these are things that you obviously never want to run out. It's probably your 20% highest volume items in the store. So these are things that your customers buy a lot. And when they come in, if you're out of them, there is nothing more frustrating to a customer. We got some data some years back from IHL that anytime a customer comes in and something that's sort of important to their basket is out of stock, there's something like a 9% chance that they just put the basket down and go shop somewhere else. And if it becomes a chronic problem, you lose that customer. You can order off of replenishment just based off of that movement report. But the other thing that I see a lot is people basically locking up too much money in on hands because of that. They're not accounting for fluctuations of demand or anything like that. And getting at demand is really kind of, the promised land when it comes to ordering. You can do it manually, but it's kind of prohibitive. So having a system that can couple ordering logic, computer-assisted ordering, to that transactional data that you're pulling out of your point of sale is hugely advantageous. And then just to fill out the example, we can look at the other side, slow movers. The story I like to tell about someone that I was working with who had 3 jars of molasses on their shelf. And that was it. He had 3 jars of molasses, always 3 jars, every time I went into the store. And I asked him about it one time. And he had basket data, and he said, that is my slowest moving item in the store. It's the slowest moving item I've ever carried, but I have one customer who comes in and spends like $600 and always buys molasses. So, that item on a movement report is a dud. Like, kill it, get it out.
Mhm.
But if you can look deeper, if you can analyze your movement and see what's in your basket, then you know that getting rid of that item is going to piss off that one customer that's really important to your business.
Yeah, and that I love that point. And you touched on some things. So again, I'm assuming most of our audience are people who've never worked with a point of sale system, or at least within a food co-op. So you were talking about deciding if you're going to want to be able to have a mobile cash register point of sale that's interacting with the system. One thing I didn't hear you discuss yet, but like this will also have in it, your costed out recipes for your deli items, and it's weighing them and putting all the product names on them. That's all within the system. Movement reports. Again, everybody's now really important to food co-ops. Why the light solution doesn't make any sense to me. Why, to be honest, you guys know I'm more like, check out all the options, make your decisions. And once in a while, I'm like, please don't waste too much time on this. Here's the deal. With point of sale, we need a point of sale system that is robust enough to manage our owner database, right? This is the critical thing where I can't imagine startup food co-ops not going with some kind of robust point of sale system that can manage that information. So you're actually able to take owners at the register, take their money, have it track that money coming in, have it spit out reports that easily go into your accounting that says, this is how many owners we have, how much equity they have in our company. That all goes through that point of sale system. So I know we're going to get into that some more in a second. I did get a question though that I think would be nice to answer here, and it's kind of a me question, but well, no, actually I'm going to ask you in a second. So I'm going to answer it, then I'm going to ask Aaron. Who makes the decision about the point of sale? Is it our future general manager or is it the board? And that question is, ideally, if your GM is there in time and has the experience to make the decision, it'd be great if it were your GM. But a lot of times it isn't. Because that decision often has to be made before they're on the ground, or at least they need you to have done a lot of in-depth research and relationship building that they can kind of look at what you've come up with and then decide if they're going to pull the trigger on it. So my feeling is the reason we're getting so many questions about this from actually stage 3 co-ops, especially too, is that a lot of these decisions have to be made because the timing of things before GMs show up. And Aaron, I wonder, what's your experience with that? Is it mostly the GMs making these decisions? Are you in relationship with these boards before that? How does it work?
Almost always I'm in some kind of discussion with the board before the GM shows up. Well, I should rephrase. When it's gone right, almost always I've been in some kind of discussion with the board before the GM has been brought on board. I think you're absolutely right. Ideally, this is sort of a final decision that a GM is gonna make. A GM, an experienced GM, is going to come in with strong ideas about how they think a co-op should run, and what they've seen be successful. And if they have a track record of success, listen to the expert. Absolutely. I've seen a couple sort of tricky situations. One co-op, especially, it kind of popped up more during COVID. There was one co-op that had the opportunity to apply for a grant that was going to cover pretty much the entire purchase of their point of sale. Grants are often tied to being spent within a certain time frame. So they got the grant, which was great. But now they had a large pot of money that had to be spent, and they didn't have a GM on board before that was going to expire. So they kind of had to make the decision and pull the trigger. The other thing that I've seen happen, and it's sort of unfortunate when this happens, is that a startup will bring on a GM, and that GM will kind of get the startup open and running, or at least close to, but not really survive the initial jump, either because they leave for something else, they're burned out, or differences with the board or whatever. So I think it's best always when there's agreement between the GM and the board. It's not ideal for a board to kind of push a decision on a GM, although sometimes circumstances require. And it's also not always the best solution to have a GM just kind of unilaterally make the decision and then have to jump ship for one reason or another.
No, I agree with you. And actually, Shirley brought up from Suncoast in the chat. She said also the board has to budget for this point of sale system long before the GM shows up. So they kind of need to know what they're in for. I think that's a phenomenal point. I agree with your point, Aaron. Actually, also, we've seen, by the way, great GMs come in from different industries or from even just from chain grocery. And they aren't used to making point of sale decisions. They don't know what's out there. They don't know what co-ops usually use. They don't know anything about needing owner data to be part of their point of sale system. So not always is waiting for that GM mean that a better decision will be made. This might be a place that you need to do a decent amount of research yourself and/or trust the consultants or organizations if you're working with NCG, National Co-op Grocers or whoever, and really take a lot of guidance on this. If you don't pull the trigger without the GM, to be able to present it to the GM this is the road we've gone down and these are our reasons, and we would need strong reasons not to continue to go down this road. So I think we're both seeing the same thing, that it rarely really gets fully left to the GM because it's not practical. The GM's not on the project early enough for that.
Yeah, so, most of the time not. And Shirley that brought up the point about fundraising, that's absolutely correct. I'll just put this out there with something that I was thinking about getting to a little later, but now that it's been brought up, it's really important to start looking around probably earlier than you think you need to. You need to have an idea generally of what you're going to want your point of sale solution to do, or what technologies you're going to want to deploy. But once you have that idea, it's beneficial to start looking at what's on the market and to start getting general ideas of how much it's going to cost you, because you do need to work that into fundraising targets or grant writing, grant applications, all that kind of stuff. There's really nothing worse than, for me, than getting a call from a startup that's already financially locked in and just saying, well, what can you do for me? Sometimes not much.
We've put aside $5,000 for point of sale, and you're like, oh wow. There's nothing. We don't want to lock you in a situation where there's nothing that you guys can do that can be able to help you, which is part of why I'm so glad you're all asking these questions about these systems and these costs up front. And I apologize, I accidentally segued us a little fast, Aaron, into that, but I will ask, since we've gone there.
We're gonna get there eventually.
Right, we're gonna get there. So I'd love to segue into the question of, when should a startup food co-op actually start their point of sale research? How early should this be happening?
Yeah, so like I said, it's I think as soon as you have a general idea of what you're going to need your technology to do for you, it's probably good to start looking at what's out on the market. I think from personal experience, the startups that I've seen kind of go through this process successfully have started looking around probably 12 to 18 months, maybe more like 18 months before they are targeting opening. At that point, it's still kind of early enough that when you start looking around and seeing what's available to you, you may have some ideas that didn't occur to you before. You may, look at a solution that can do something that you weren't expecting, and say, oh, we really want to take advantage of that. Well, you still got time at that point to work that into your plan, and hopefully fundraising targets, et cetera. Yeah, I think 18 months, 12 months at the at the shortest is probably a good time frame. And that's also one of the reasons why it's kind of tough to wait for a GM to be involved. I think most of the startups that I've talked to don't have a GM on board 18 months prior to opening. In fact, I think I've only ever seen one exception to that.
Okay. And this brings me to a point, just want to touch on with you startups. Once you know the size of your store and the size of the physical store and the sales volume and the general departments, you have enough information to start your POS research. Okay. So, and maybe that's the time you call Aaron. Maybe you're just looking for co-ops that have a similar volume to get a feel for how much of a system they have. One of the things you'll be looking at is, how many different stations do we need, things like that. But once you have that information, and that's my take. Aaron, would you say, like, if they have the size of the store, the sales volume, and the general departments, is that time to start just kind of looking around, or is that actually even a reasonable time to connect with actual providers and start talking?
No, I think it absolutely is. When I think about building a quote, to build a really detailed quote that might end up going to contracts, I need a lot of information. But to start providing kind of ballpark pricing, a range, I don't need a lot more than, how many point of sale lanes. If you've thought through your smart scale layout, if that's useful. If you have an idea of what kind of volume you're projecting in your first year and what you think your growth might be through year 5, then I can use that to kind of guesstimate what you might need in terms of back office licenses, inventory scanners, that kind of stuff. So when you have that, general sense of what you're looking at from a layout perspective, you can absolutely get ballpark pricing, and that's probably enough to start working into fundraising targets. One big one to keep an eye on is self-checkout. If you are planning on doing self-checkout, that can be a big upfront expense, and you do want to keep that in mind from a strategy perspective, because it's at that point it really becomes a question of ROI. How many self-checkouts do you need to actually start paying back, rather than having to staff more people at the front end. Another thing to think about, and this is just popping up a lot because the technology has really changed, is electronic shelf labels. That also can be a pretty significant upfront expense. But with the way the technology is now, I've seen some numbers suggesting an 18-month ROI on that.
So one thing I heard you mention in there, so if you have the store size and the volume and a general kind of, you're like, well, if you have this many scales, often I think what startup boards are looking for is, we have no idea. We know we're gonna have a deli, but what do you mean by scale system? And so is that something that is reasonable for them to expect when they're investigating relationships with organizations like yours? Like, here's the size store and the programs and the volume. Can you give us some idea of how many, of how many units we're going to need and what kind of stuff? Is that reasonable for them to bring, or should they have more of an idea of what they're going to need as a business before they come to providers?
No, I think that's reasonable. If you can tell me that you're planning on, packing your own bulk or doing your own pre-pack food, or, cutting produce, that kind of stuff, then I know that you need 1, maybe 2 scales on the back end. If you have meat and or fish counters, then I know that you're going to need scales for that. If you're making sandwiches, I know you'll need a scale for that kind of stuff. So we can, we can get close. It's not going to be, guarantee you, it's not going to be the right number, but close enough.
So that takes me to asking you the big question I think on a lot of boards' minds are, it's like, what are the key issues that you think co-ops should be considering, these board members who have never worked with these systems, some of them, in making this decision? What are those big key issues?
Yeah, I think a lot of it does come back to function and making sure you have the tools to enable the co-op to run. If you're looking at doing e-commerce, then you're going to need an e-commerce platform. Are you looking at a point of sale solution that has built-in e-commerce, or do you need to then go and find a third-party e-commerce platform that you can integrate to your point of sale solution. Going back to self-checkout, that's a big one. It's becoming more popular with co-ops since COVID. I think probably because of labor, but it's something that shoppers have come to prefer in a lot of places. But that's also another another situation where you have to ask if the point of sale solution that you're looking at has self-checkout, or if that's actually another point of sale that you're then going to have to bolt onto the same back office solution. Understanding what kinds of information you're going to rely on is also big, and that's really where talking to other co-ops is going to be super helpful. Talking to successful co-ops about what kinds of reports they're running and what sort of data they're looking at for analytics purposes, and then understanding how the solutions you're looking at are going to provide you with that same data. Stepping back and looking at sort of a larger picture, I want to go back to this idea of technology stack. The stack is sort of your whole technology environment. And if you have different tools for each thing that you're trying to tackle, what you have is a diagram that ends up looking like somebody threw some spaghetti at a wall. You have 15 plus tools that all have to talk together, and you have to figure out how you're going to manage that. My personal feeling is that the more capable your point of sale solution is, because that's where a lot of it really does come together, the simpler your stack will be and the easier it is to manage. You'll find that some point of sale solutions out there are sort of more geared towards core functionality. They sell stuff, there's transactional reporting, they might have purchasing and receiving, price maintenance, margin compliance, that kind of stuff, and some reporting built in. And then you'll find that other solutions offer more touch points on the front end. They have self-checkout, they have e-commerce, they have mobile, and on the back end, they may have a built-in email tool, they may have a built-in analytics tool, and critical for co-ops, they may have built-in member management tools. Yeah, and then I think you couple all of that with the price that you're paying for it.
We had a quick question in the comments about just can you explain what e-commerce is and how that would integrate into a POS?
Yeah, so e-commerce can mean a few things. I think it's certainly less common in the grocery world to need shipping. Although I have worked for some retailers that ship specialty products, that kind of stuff. If you are shipping, that's probably going through your e-commerce tool like a Shopify or something like that, that can then integrate to a ShipWorks. You can calculate taxes, you can calculate shipping, and print labels, etc. For grocery, it's much more common that really what you're talking about is putting an order in online, either for delivery or pickup at store. And you need an online platform to facilitate that. If your point of sale solution has that built in, then the good news is that that's probably more treated like another software license, as opposed to an entirely different solution. You probably have an easier time making sure that inventory stays synced. So if you are doing perpetual inventory or keeping a close eye on inventory at least, the inventory that's reflected online will be a very close match to what's in store, which I tend to think is pretty important because it's, I find it irritating when I put an order in online and then start getting it, this is out of stock, this is out of stock, this is out of stock. Well, great, now I still have to go grocery shopping. Thank you.
For sure. So, you mentioned, purchasing on the earlier side, something you mentioned lightly somewhere in here, like that getting the point of sale system in, 2 months before you open versus, so can you talk about why purchasing on the earlier side and what the earlier side would mean?
Yeah, absolutely. It's really a matter of logistics. When we work with an established retailer, and I can't speak to other vendors, but just for us, when we're working with an established retailer, our typical lead time from contract signing to a live implementation is about 8 to 10 weeks. That's enough time to build the database the way that it needs to be built, to get merchant accounts sorted and set up, and do all the kinds of other odds and ends, make sure the site's prepped, etc. And then we can send somebody on site, and they can take down one lane of the existing solution, put a lane in, people can get comfortable on it, and then they can do the rest of the changeover once everything is running smoothly by the end of the day. And that also leaves time for training, some basic training, not advanced, but enough basic training to really kind of get you up and running. There's a couple things that make me suggest that startups should really be purchasing more in the sort of 12 to 16 week out range. I usually suggest 16 plus. On the one side, if everything miraculously is going very smoothly and you have the opportunity to open a little bit sooner, then that does leave a buffer to kind of pull the trigger earlier and get started on implementation. But just sort of working backwards from go live, you can't really open your doors with just one active point of sale lane if you have a plan that calls for 4, right? So you have to create a situation where you can get those lanes in ahead of time, up and running, get the staff trained so that people are then comfortable when it comes time to open, that you have your 4 lanes in place and the people there know how to run them. So we like to do what we call a split install with startups, where we'll send somebody on site and get everything installed and provide some training. And then, a few weeks later, we send somebody back on site just to make sure that go live goes smoothly. And really, by the time you've worked all of that backwards, you end up with about 4 months on the short side, and buffering that a little bit is, I think, just common sense.
That's really interesting. It leads to this question I wanted to bring into this, is that it might not occur to board members. It didn't occur to me the first time I expanded the store and put in a new point of sale system, that your point of sale company is really a partner on the opening team. Like so could you just talk a little bit about what role, like you said, we'll be on site for this, or, I think a lot of people don't realize what roles you guys actually play in part of that opening team, from training to setting up to being there on opening day in case things blow up. Can you just talk through that for folks?
Yeah, absolutely. I want to start with training because I think this is really where it falls short a lot of the time. If you've run point of sale solutions before, then my hope would be that you know how complicated they are, how complicated they can be, and that you have been disabused of the notion that you can just put a new one in and have everything work correctly. So really, training is the first step. And there's walking through the sort of logistics of the implementation, but training is really that first step in the partnership, where you want to make sure that the company that you're working with is going to provide you with the overview you need of the system, of the tools in the system, how they work, where to use them, all that kind of stuff. And you want to make sure that you have what you need to be relatively comfortable with that before the system goes in. There is no such thing as a perfect training plan. Every business is different. Something is going to get missed. It's going to happen. So once you're live, you should be prepared to lean on your point of sale vendor fairly heavily for at least the first 6 months. So you need somebody who's also invested in your success. You need to make sure that they have the educational tools available. Having a comprehensive online manual is really beneficial, preferably one that's written in your language of choice. Having video documentation of tools is also super beneficial. And then having people with your provider, your partner of choice, who are capable of kind of helping you take that next step. So, you've got your point of sale system implemented, and the next thing is to start driving some additional business with email marketing campaigns. Having a point of sale provider that can work with you to set up those first few campaigns, make sure you're comfortable with them, help you track whether or not they're successful, kind of take you through the process the first time or two that you need to.
Excellent. And then I wanted to ask, when you're so you're talking about that, I think some folks don't realize it's an ongoing relationship. And can you just talk about like this, so doors open and then you guys disappear. What is the relationship with the point of sale provider that you choose on an ongoing basis?
Yeah, so that's going to really depend on the point of sale provider that you choose. Some point of sale solutions out there don't really change a lot over time. They kind of do what they do, and bug fixes get released, et cetera. And mostly your relationship with that provider is going to be, hey, this is broke, help me fix it, basically. I think you're better off working with a point of sale provider that is more active on the development side, because hopefully then they are listening to their community and using the needs of their community to drive their roadmap. You become part of that community. So that's one way in which it's really a partnership, if you have a company that's doing that for you. And then, of course, anytime updates are released, anytime new tools are released, there's questions. There's how can we leverage this? Help us with XYZ. Businesses change over time too. So you talk about what your first 5 years are going to look like. You may open with core functionality. Perpetual inventory might not be something that you want to tackle right away. You might want to tackle that in year 2 once you're comfortable. Same thing with e-commerce. I generally don't recommend, unless it's a critical part of your business, I generally don't recommend starting e-commerce right when you open the doors. I think one of the things that that can kind of get missed sometimes is that when you first open your doors, you're going to have a lot of goodwill and excitement towards your operation. And if you do what you do well, if you do what you've promised well, you can sustain that excitement as you then implement new things. But if you bite off too much up front and start making mistakes, then you're really putting yourself, really setting yourself back.
I would deeply agree with that. Nice to hear that alignment. Every once in a while I hear Jimmy disagrees with me. I'm like, don't open with e-commerce. Get down running a store beautifully first, because e-commerce is tricky, and doing it well, even for experienced stores, is hard, and you alienate people when you don't do it well. I do want to bring up a couple things for startups who are listening. You talked about right sizing systems, and having the right tools, for what you are. And this is a kind of a me line. There is a line at which simpler systems might be the right choice for a co-op, but we're talking a very small sales volume. So I don't know if you have a line in mind, but so I would kind of kick it to you. And if you don't have an answer, it's okay. But most startup food co-ops are opening between 2 and 4.5 million in annual sales. Do you feel like all of that fits within having a robust system like Catapult or something similar? What are your thoughts?
I absolutely do. Most of the time when we run when we look at ROI, based on the data that we're able to get back, we see a return on investment sometimes as low as $750,000 a year in annual volume. It's really just a question of making sure that you're actually going to use the tools that you're buying. And I think that, if you're in the sort of $2 to $4 million range, it's absolutely a discussion. If you think that there's any chance that you'll have the people to do what you want to take advantage of the system, then buy the tools.
And one of the things I will stress keeping in mind, folks, is that if you're like, well, we're going to start at 2 million, we feel like we can get away with this, but where are your sales supposed to be year 5? Take a look at that pro forma. And if it says 4 million, 5 million, that's the decision you're making, right? We want to start with a system that can grow to that. It doesn't mean there aren't other options. I am not pushing Catapult as the only option. It is honestly one of my favorite options for y'all because it's what most food co-ops use. And so you have peers who can share lots of knowledge and so forth. And we know that it works in food co-ops. There are other potentials. Just make sure you're always keeping in mind, what are those year 5 sales when looking at those decisions, not just year 1. The other one I want to talk about, and maybe you can add to this too, Aaron, is this is not, then you'll need an expert on staff. The only people who know how to use this system, and when something has to be, people have to be trained on it, or something has to be changed or updated, someone's going to have to know how to do it. And quite often in these smaller volume stores, that is the GM. So you'll want to know, what is your GM's plan? Who's going to be point of sale? They can't afford a tech manager at 4 million. I'm just going to say that right here. You can send them back to shoot the messenger. Okay. They can't afford an IT manager at 4 million in sales. So who's going to be heading that up? Who does the buck stop with? And who does Aaron's team work with to keep you successful? Quite often that does need to be the GM. Do you have any thoughts on that, Aaron?
Yeah, no, I think that's absolutely right. I think it's absolutely correct. I do see successful arrangements sometimes where you have, front end management under one person and back end management under another, maybe a head buyer or something. You might have somebody who's in charge of marketing, overseeing your email campaigns or, promotional campaigns, that kind of stuff. But you're absolutely right. You do need to know who is responsible for what. And then you need to know who's responsible for the things that you forgot to assign.
Right.
So, if you're at a volume that doesn't necessarily allow you to have an IT director or, a specific point of sale manager, then yes, I think, knowing who is really responsible for what is critical.
And I'm going to lean in, folks, to saying your GM has to learn the system. And I say this is a GM who hates tech, never wanted to learn our POS, put other managers in charge of it when we expanded. And that came back to bite me. Your GM does need to know when the buck stops, when lane 2 is broken and not working, and there's only 2 lanes, GM has to know something. That's my opinion. So Aaron, we've got about 5, 6, 7 minutes here left. I want to give you room. What else should new co-ops consider? What have you not gotten a chance to share that you'd like to?
Ooh, well, we dove into this a little bit earlier. Just the idea of partnership. It's really easy in a sales process to get locked in on functionality and how functionality lines up with the business plan, and thinking about what your growth plan looks like and what tools you may want to implement down the line and all that kind of stuff. It's very easy to get kind of immersed in the tech and then forget to actually take a look at the company behind it and what their plan is. Mm-hmm. And I think that's really, really critical. Check references, absolutely. And I would encourage you, when you are checking references, to be specific. I keep talking about perpetual inventory because I think that it's something everybody should do. If perpetual inventory is on your roadmap, make sure that you're given references that can talk to you about having implemented perpetual inventory with that system. Make sure that you're given references that can tell you what that process was like, how much work they spend on it, how much time they spend on it day to day, all that kind of stuff. Make sure that there's an active community around the system too. Make sure that you're working with a vendor that understands co-ops, and has a good kind of grounding in the needs of co-ops, because it is different. And yes, absolutely, we do have a system that accommodates SNAP benefits. That's something that we've been way out in front on, and double up food bucks for anybody that's wondering about that specifically. That was actually something that NSDA brought to us some years back. So
nice. Yeah, I know it's important for them. We do have a question
Yeah.
from Sheila when you have a chance to. So who raised their hand?
Yep.
Sheila, what's your question?
Hi there. I've been chomping at the bit like crazy. I'm sure you're watching my head nodding with like everything you're saying. I come from a point of sale background, and installed probably over 100 hotels, restaurants, bars, multiple outlets and all that kind of thing. So I'm just like going, yeah, what are you saying is right? What are you saying is right? What I'd like to know is, because I've worked with so many other companies, co-op wise, and not, of course, to discount ECRS, if as a smart business person, we should look at lots of solutions and then try and pick the right person, pick the right solution for us. In your opinion, Aaron, besides you guys, who else is out there? Who else is is another player? Like, who would you compare yourself? Like, I used to work for HSI way back in the day, and then Micros bought them, but then Aloha was the biggest competitor, but the most similar. It's like, what, do I like red sneakers or blue sneakers?
So I'm actually going to take this one, because that's a weird position. I totally understand the question. And I actually got the private too, by the way. So I hear you guys. I'm not going to ask Aaron to answer that. The ones that, like I said, most food co-ops use are going to be Catapult, SMS. And if you're a smaller co-op, if you're at 5 million or under for a good long time, COPOS, COPOS, are the 3 systems you see consistently in food co-ops. I really don't recommend exploring beyond that, just because these ones have been narrowed down because they specialize in dealing with the unique challenges of food co-ops for such a long time. But those are the 3, if you want to look into, you're like, I want to do my due diligence, those are the 3 that I would look into.
Yeah, and I'll jump in and say,
co-ops and
I'll put it in the chat. Go ahead and answer.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah, and I would just jump in and say that I would never try to steer somebody away from doing due diligence. Frankly, I think it makes us look good if I'm wearing my salesman hat. But you have to be confident in your purchase. I mean, you're talking about something that's going to be a big chunk of money out of your pocket, and it's going to be a significant ongoing expense. You have to feel like you bought the best solution available to you, and you have to feel like the people behind it are the right people. There is one thing that I did want to touch on that we haven't had the chance to really talk about yet. Going back to the idea of who's behind the system, something that you really need to understand and consider is whether you're buying your solution from a dealer or whether you're buying it direct. And it's not that buying from a dealer versus direct is a guarantee of better or worse service, but it does have an impact. If you're working through a dealer and it's a technical problem, they have to go back to the solution manufacturer and then come back to you. So you kind of end up with this communication chain. If you're buying direct, you don't run into that. Again, I'm biased. I think that direct is probably better in most cases, but it's worth considering. And you may feel like if you have a really good dealer that's selling a solution that you're particularly interested in, it's worth considering. But it's important. It's going to matter.
Really good points. So any last questions or comments for Aaron before? I want to make sure I've left room. Some of you have been sending them to me privately, but I think we caught most of them. Okay. I don't know about you guys, but I think this is a session that's been long overdue. So thank you so much to Aaron for coming and having this conversation with us. If folks want to reach out, if they want to connect, how can they do that?
Email me directly, Chase, CHASE at ECRS.com. Best way to get in touch.
Excellent. All right. Thank you so much. And see you guys when you tell me what topics you need. This is when we get our best sessions. Keep those comments coming. Thanks again to Aaron for being a part of the series. Just want to make sure you know there's 3 sessions left coming up. Tonight, I'm really excited about the case study. We're going to have Fertile Ground here with us, food co-op, a startup, and if you don't know them, in Raleigh, North Carolina. And they're going to talk about not having internal board systems that were working very well, and then committing to an app, to a technology to organize all their board work, how it went, how they made it successful. You can learn a lot from it. Simone's amazing. So I hope you come join us. Tomorrow, we have the case study with Rise Community Market. This is a very small rural community, Cairo, Illinois. They opened their store just about a week ago, and they are going to have their lead organizer and hopefully one of their board members here to talk about the process, talk about what they did. It's kind of a different process in these really small rural communities, and there's a lot that all of us can learn from it. And then I forgot to change this one. Darn it, I screwed this up. Tomorrow night, do not miss. We are going to have Tamar Yisrael here talking about the history of Black cooperation, food co-ops, and other kind of retail cooperation in the United States. It's not one you're going to want to miss. Thank you again to our FCI Live sponsors for our Summer 2023 series. We could not make this possible without them.